Welcome everybody to the second in the Transition and Recovery webinar series of Sustain, the Australian Food Network. My name is Nick Rose. I'm the Executive Director of Sustain, and with me today is my colleague Georgia Caravis, the Communication and Events Coordinator for Sustain, as well as Dr. Kelly Donati, who is the Chair of Sustain and the Coordinator of the Bachelor of Food Studies and Master of Food Systems programs at William Angliss Institute in Melbourne, where I also teach myself. And I've also noticed that we have another Board Director of Sustain, William Izzo Luravel. So welcome Izzo, and also a big welcome to all the members of Sustain who are joining us today. So without going any further, just wish to acknowledge that here in Melbourne, we are on the lands of the Wurundjeri and the Bunurong peoples of the Kulin Nation. I'm paying my respects to elders past, present and emerging, to any persons of Aboriginal descent who may be with us on the Zoom today, and to acknowledge that these lands are Aboriginal lands and that sovereignty was never ceded. So we're really excited about today's webinar, Young Farmers Food System Changemakers. It's a really fantastic opportunity to hear from some of the leaders, to acknowledge and hear from and celebrate some of the leaders and changemakers who are shaping the future of farming in Australia. That's the first goal of today's webinar. The second is to highlight the critical need for the creation of pathways to support young people to enter and remain in farming as critical to the future of agriculture, food systems and food security in Australia. And thirdly, to showcase three organisations that are creating these pathways, what they've been able to achieve to date and what their goals are for the future. So just briefly by way of introduction, what I'm going to do now is play for you a short introductory video to the whole space of food systems, why this work is so important, and a little bit of introduction about our organisation Sustain for those who don't know about it. So we are now, this will take about 2 minutes. This is an animated illustrated video. Sorry, no, I'll just do that again. All right.
Food, the planet, everything is connected. Microbes, soils, water, seeds, sun, farmers, animals and birds, food, health, communities, businesses, government. Together, we all make and drive our food system, the people, processes, infrastructure and policies that put food on our tables every day. The health of our food system impacts us all, and right now, our food system is sick. In the summer of 2019 to 20, Australia burned like never before. We are rightly fearful for our future. We see species loss, increasing poverty and food insecurity, growing mounds of wasted food, drought, farmers leaving the land, and panic buying, leaving the supermarket shelves empty. All this is connected. It's complex and confusing. But now we need to think about our food system in its entirety, about what it takes to feed ourselves, and we need to act. What do you know about the food you eat? Who grew it and where? Who picked it, transported it? Who processed it and what was added to it? Who sold it? Who made money from that food? And who didn't? What happens to the food that's not eaten? Sustain answers these questions. We're a think and do network specialising in designing and building sustainable and healthy food systems. We work with governments and community leaders to help map local food systems and develop evidence-based and achievable policies and programs. Sustain sows the seeds of change with events, policy work, practice and thought leadership, capacity building and collective action. We connect local farmers with schools. We support migrant women to realise their food business dreams. We give people, councils and organisations the tools to help them become empowered food citizens, supporting healthy communities, people and ecosystems. This is powerful and important work. We can only do it together. Are you ready to lead the change in your community? We can help. Sustain.
Okay. Sorry, I'm just going to pause that for a second. So that's an introduction to our work at Sustain in the space of food systems. It really sets the context for what we're going to talk about over the next hour and a half. Just before I introduce Julia and Tanya from Farmer Incubator to talk about the work that they've been doing over the last couple of years, I would like to just give you a couple of reminders, and George is going to be sharing these links in the chat, and we'll come back to them at the end as well. So what we've been doing over the last month, really, as part of our work on urban agriculture and supporting an agenda to make our towns and cities edible across Australia, is the development of what we've called a pandemic gardening survey as part of our coordination of the 3rd National Urban Agriculture Forum to take place in April 2021, together with 6 other organisations that are part of our Urban Ag Forum Steering Committee. So that survey, when it was launched, we thought it might get 1,000 responses or so. We've been absolutely blown away, and as we speak, over 8,700 people across the country have completed that survey and shared an amazing array of experiences and perspectives about what gardening, what edible gardening has meant to them at this time. So I just want to briefly share with you one comment. This is one of about 25,000 comments that have been shared, just so you can see the sorts of things that people are saying. And the survey, I should say, is completely anonymous. So this individual yesterday said, "I'm so glad somebody is recording this awakening. I feel that it keeps me in touch with the basics of our existence. It reminds me that the complexities of life can sometimes just require observation and interaction. It reminds me that the graciousness of life is abundant. These are qualities learnt in a garden." So I think that really kind of sums up just you know, the depth of feeling and significance that edible food gardening has had for so many thousands of people around this time, and will continue to do so. It has done, of course, for decades for many people who've been doing this for a long time, and those who've just taken it up in the last few months or year or so. So the survey closed at midnight tonight. I'd really encourage all of you today to take 7 or 8 minutes to complete that and to share it through your networks, please, so we can make the biggest possible impact that we can when we come to analyse all that information and generate a report. The second reminder is that for our next webinar on August the 19th, which we're just announcing today, we have another fantastic range of organisations focused. The theme of that webinar is growing resilience and community, diversity and community agriculture in Australia, and that's really looking at projects that are about land sharing and particularly supporting new Australians from refugee and migrant backgrounds to be connected to the land and to realise their goals of being included and participating in Australia and contributing their skills and experience from an agricultural perspective in food-based enterprises. So we're talking about Food Next Door in Mildura, about Green Connect in the Illawarra, and the United African Farm in Pakenham. So please check that out. That'll be a really fantastic webinar as well. We're very excited about that. Thirdly, a request to support us. We've been shortlisted one of 24 applications out of 430 in the Australian Ethical Community Grants program for their community grants funding round at the moment. This is for our pop-up urban satellite farm in Preston in the city of Darebin as a food justice initiative to partner with a local landowner, with the social enterprise Bridge Darebin, with the city of Darebin and others to turn that vacant lot currently growing weeds in concrete into a productive space, making food available for food justice and food security purposes. Again, it's a really exciting project. Please check it out. and vote for us if you can. There's some other fantastic projects up there too to vote for as well. Really great to see the kinds of innovative ideas that groups all over the country are coming up with in so many ways and so important. And finally, thanks to everybody here who is a member of Sustain. Of course, you have free attendance at this webinar. If you do like our work and what we do, we'd invite you to consider becoming a member of Sustain. We've just announced new solidarity category of membership, which means that 10% of membership goes to the pay the rent First Nation sovereignty goal. So that's what you're contributing to by becoming a member of Sustain, as well as other benefits. So with that, with the preliminaries done, we're going to actually get stuck into the webinar right now, and it's my very great pleasure to welcome the team from Farmer Incubator to share with you what they've been doing. So Farmer Incubator, for those who don't know, was established back in 2013 as a not-for-profit organisation whose aim is to help grow future farmers from an enterprising collective of young people who are concerned about food quality, food sovereignty and food security, and who are yearning to work the land. So we're thrilled to have with us Julia Laidlaw and Tanya Massey. To introduce them both briefly, Julia's going to speak first and then Tanya. Julia has a family farming background and has worked with many great people on fair food research and ag projects around Australia, also in Vanuatu and Latin America. Julia has been a member of the Farmer Incubator team for 2 years, and in 2019 she started the Sporadical City Mushrooms, a zero-waste urban mushroom farm growing seasonal delicacies in Alphington, Melbourne, and they are absolutely delicious, and I'm really excited that we are helping to support Julia and her co-farmer Buttons through actually making those mushrooms available to the subscribers of the Melbourne Food Hub's Grow Source Eat weekly veg parcel. Really, really excited about that. And Tanya Massey is a lifelong apprentice of farming and has worked across a range of urban, rural and remote communities to reconnect people, food and country. Her academic background spans development and Indigenous studies with a Master's in Agricultural Science. And I had the enormous privilege and pleasure of working with Tanya for 2 years when she was the very first project coordinator of the Cardinia Food Circles project that Sustain has been leading with Cardinia Shire Council for the last 3 years. So it's fantastic to be able to collaborate with Tanya in this webinar. So Julia is going to go first, and she'll be sharing insights and experiences from the work of Farmer Incubator in delivering the pop-up Garlic Farmer program, which is a collaborative farming learning model that reduces the high costs and risks associated with entering farming, and which has trained 74 new and aspiring growers since it was launched in 2016. Take it away, Julia.
Cheers. Thanks, Nick. I'm just going to share my screen with everyone and get started. Good morning, everyone. It's great to be here. I hope you're all really well. Thanks, Nick and Sustain, for the opportunity to chat about Incubator. So, as Nick mentioned, Tanya and I are going to be presenting today on the work that we do, talking a bit about the pop-up garlic farming program, and Tanya will be talking about some research that we've done and what we're planning, what we've learned and what we're wanting to get out of this this research and where we're hoping to take it. So as Nick mentioned, Farmer Incubator was started in 2013 as a not-for-profit social enterprise really in Melbourne, and it's been driven by a core of part-time volunteers, lots of different faces over the years, but and different backgrounds, but we all share a similarity that we've worked in agriculture and we're all concerned about food quality, food sovereignty, and the challenges that are being faced by the next generation of farmers and the health of our planet. Our work is really strongly focused on regenerative farming practices, and we see as a missing stepping stone for aspiring farmers so that they can get into the agricultural sector. Farmer Incubator was really started and motivated because by the realization that the average age of Australian farmers is 57 years old, and there's a decline in family farms and rural communities. And as such, you know, the Australian agriculture is undergoing a massive generational shift. And so it's struggling with shrinking rural communities, economic viability, isolation, and as we all know, the fallout of climate change and ecosystem degradation, of which industrial agriculture plays a big part. Despite that, there is a new generation of farmers who are really keen to work the land regeneratively and to provide and revive local fresh food economies and communities. Unfortunately, a lot of their challenges, they face a lot of challenges and barriers, which is inheriting a severely degraded planet, and also the socioeconomic challenges of actually being able to access land. Land is very expensive, and a lot of new farmers, it's a high risk if you were actually to go out and try and buy one. If you didn't have the capital, you'd be going into a great deal of debt. They're also struggling because the barriers in learning and accessing hand-on training in regenerative farming practices. So for those who don't know what a farmer incubator is, there are a diversity of different models. And it's a model of co-farming that has been extensively tested and proved in the US and parts of Europe and other parts of the world. But their aim around a farmer incubator is really try to help more farmers farm by helping them tackle the high cost, high risk nature through the established of collaborative farming models and the sharing of resources. So if you just look at this image, it's this pretty basic example that we could to explain it. So there's a main farm that makes leases available to new farmers for a subsidised peppercorn or in-kind kind of lease. And this main farm is, there are working and experienced farmers that provide mentorship and support to these new farmers. And they all work together and share responsibilities, but also the resources and infrastructure that a farm has but isn't necessarily always in demand, such as tractors, sheds, hothouses, and they're also supported in accessing markets and mentors if there aren't mentors available in the main farming incubator. Within the farmer incubator models, most of the ones that we're aware of, there's also a level of formal training which kind of sets it apart from, I suppose, other kind of internships and on-farm kind of hands-on learning experiences in that. There's a structured curriculum that supports them in developing business skills and agroecological skills so that they can grow their business confidently and strongly. And this training can either take place in-house and is administered and delivered by the farmer incubator and the organisation that has established it, or they partner with an external training organisation such as a university or TAFE. So what do we do at Farmer Incubator here in Australia? We don't have our own land, so we're distinct to a lot of the farmer incubators overseas, but we're still really working to provide opportunities for new farmers to start small and work cooperatively and really build their knowledge and confidence and access to resources so that they can move forward confidently and independently. And a really strong part of this is making sure that they are connected to land, mentors, and also the broader farming community and other new and aspiring farmers. What this looks like on the ground is, and how we actually implement this without having a farm ourselves, is we deliver day-long workshops and skills sharing. In the photos here, you see we did a urban farmer workshop with Sim from Spoke and Spade, a farmer in Heidelberg in northeast in the city of Melbourne. He leases out backyards in his area, and he runs a market garden out of them, and supports himself through his business, which is a CSA, and also provides fresh produce to restaurants. In this workshop, we just kind of went through the nuts and bolts of his urban farming business, discussing these challenges, how he sets priorities, access to finance, how he accesses and negotiates lands in this instance, and markets, his marketing approach, and how he basically, his business planning approach. We also do a lot of network building. We really believe that community is integral to this movement and any kind of change, and especially in the farming community where isolation is such a challenge. So we are part of social, I suppose, collaborative events where we get people together with other organisations such as the Faulkner Food Bowls, and do presentations such as these to share and answer questions and collaborate like that. But we also provide volunteering opportunities for people who might not be able or to join us and the core organising committee and commit to that kind of volunteering, but we've always got opportunities to get hands-on and I suppose weed, sow or harvest the garlic crop that we've got, depending on what time of year that you're tapping in. We also have done some research. I mean, while we're always really interested in looking for feedback from our participants in any kind of programs that we run, we've also last year, in an attempt to try and build on our program experience and what we've been doing, decided that it's time to undertake a feasibility study to look at what an actual farmer incubator farm would look like here in the Australian context, since it hasn't been done yet. And we received funding from Right for Change and the William Buckland Foundation to do that. And Tanya will be talking about that a bit more very shortly. And we also have our pop-up garlic program, which we're probably most well known for. The pop-up garlic farming program is an 8-month program where participants are provided with access to land, garlic seeds, tools, and the knowledge and support to help them grow and take a crop right through from sowing to market. They're provided with 500 garlic plants, and a lot of this this program is structured around 8 different workshops, which works hand in hand with the participants as they work through the cultivation and growing process of their garlic. So the workshops start with understanding soils, cultivating and planting. We look at different tools, pest and disease management using natural pest management methods. We dive deep into marketing. And last year we had our first co-farming and accessing land for your future farm workshop. And of course there's a workshop on harvesting. The workshops are run and facilitated by us, but they're run by farmers, extension workers. We bring in chefs and people from the Melbourne Farmers Market to give input and feedback on how to best market and access their markets. We run farm tours, as I mentioned, tool handling and use demonstration. And last year we had the pleasure of going out and doing our co-farming workshop out at the Harcourt Farming Collective north of Melbourne. Each of the sites is set up in groups of 4. We had 5 different sites last year in and around Melbourne, at Keilor, Yarra Valley, Collingwood Children's Farm, Cardinia, and out in the Mornington Peninsula. and each group is supported by a site facilitator, who we see here is Ryan with his team out in the Yarra Valley. So just a few quick stats on what we've achieved over the years. Since 2013, 74 participants have gone through the program from seed to harvest, with over 80% of those participants being under 40 years of age, and a high percentage of them are female. 8 different sites across Melbourne have been accessed and activated, with more out in the peri-urban and regional areas, with most sites being offered to us for free, is a real testament to how people are really enthusiastic about what we're doing, and they're keen to support it. And participants have walked away with basic farming skills and a clear confidence, and I suppose a better understanding of themselves about whether this is a path that they want to go down. They have stronger networks, and some of our participants have gone on to do farming internships and gone to start their own farming businesses. The pop-up garlic program has been a lean way of running and testing out the incubator model in Australia, but as I mentioned last year, we decided that we wanted to see if we could ramp it up to the next level, and so applied for some funding so we could run a feasibility study, which Tanya will now talk about. Over to you, Tanya.
Thanks, Jules. And hi, everyone. Very excited to be a part of this today. I'm just going to share my screen with you. Here we go. So as Jules mentioned, I've been part of sort of leading the research with Farmer Incubator, along with Beck Rafferty, who's here on the call as well, who's been researching alongside me into really building an understanding of, okay, what are the pathways that Farmer Incubator can take to expand on the great work it's already doing. And very early on, sort of in the process, we learnt that there isn't a lot of understanding about beginner farmer training programs, and that they're one of the most poorly understood areas of agriculture, food systems and community development research and practice. So that was a little bit daunting, but also really pointed to the importance of building some knowledge and understanding about this space. So our intent in the research was to develop an understanding of the Australian context, what's already happening, what are the needs, to learn from international initiatives all across the globe, and then to use this learning to inform the future pathways of Farmer Incubator. And our focus was really sort of on an action outcome. So we took a participatory action research approach, and our lens was very firmly placed on regenerative and agroecological farming practices and growing next generation of farmers in that vein, on farming that's embedded in local and regional food systems, on learning from and working with practitioners and doers with their hands in the earth, and also really on learning about initiatives that provide those critical hands-on learning pathways for our next generation farmers.
Tanya, I'm so sorry to interrupt. For some reason, I think Zoom doesn't like showing Adobe when it's in full screen mode. So we can't see your screen right now.
Oh, okay. Let me see if I can.
I'm sorry to break your flow. I know that's the most awful thing to do.
That's okay. You know, it's important everyone can see me. Let me just have a look. Sharing is paused. Bring your shared window to the front.
Yeah, I've got it now.
Okay. So is that format okay?
Yeah, I think that's big enough for most people to see, and we can, yeah, take inquiries afterwards if they want a specific slide.
Okay, cool. Sorry everyone, technical issues this end. I'll keep going. So I think we've skipped a page. Let me just go back. So our approach was to do sort of a quick dip into desktop research of academic and grey literature. We didn't have the resources to do a comprehensive lit review, to really focus on talking to people on the ground. So we developed and sent out a survey that reached 226 new and aspiring farmers all across Australia in every state and territory apart from the Northern Territory. And we interviewed 28 aspiring new and established farmers, educators and knowledge holders in this space. And what we heard was that there are some really critical challenges which we already knew, but we were able to sort of get a bit more, evidence and rich data around it, that it's facing our new and aspiring farmers around accessing capital, accessing land, accessing the sort of hands-on learning and training pathways, and specifically regenerative and agroecological farming, government, philanthropic, public support, climate change, and also social isolation and precedent. I'm just going to sort of dig a bit deeper into each of these quickly. So I think in terms of accessing capital, if you're entering farming outside a family, it's not a cheap proposition to start a farm in terms of accessing land and then the equipment that you need to access as well. But a really interesting thing that we found out through our research is the fact that if you look at the majority of farming families, businesses across Australia, that they rely on the equity of their ownership to land in order to access debt, to sort of maintain their ongoing running costs and upgrade infrastructure. And because of new and aspiring farmers finding sort of it very difficult to access land in itself, they don't therefore have the equity that land ownership gives you to access the capital that most established farming businesses are able to access. Accessing land is sort of another really the number 2 challenge facing our new farmers, with the sort of ongoing upwards trajectory of land prices, making it, for some farmers would take 400 years to pay for land if we bought here, as that quote says on the right. But the other sort of, I think, challenge that isn't so often spoken about is that when young farmers are accessing land through rent or other forms of land tenure, there's often insecure tenure associated with that. New and young farmers are putting a hell of a lot of energy and time into building up a business and investing in the natural capital on that farm with no guarantee that they can be there for a long period of time. So in Australia, we lack some really well-developed models and pathways for giving secure land tenure to next generation farmers. Limited hands-on learning pathways was challenge number 3. 75% of the beginner farmers we surveyed stated that there is an urgent need for more farmer-to-farmer mentoring and land-based incubation programs in Australia, and it is hard to find pathways. There are a range of courses at a sort of tertiary and TAFE level, not many with this explicit hands-on regenerative focus, but some really great developments and things out there, but you definitely have to dig. They're sort of not readily available across all of our conventional institutions. And there are a range of challenges that are sort of coupled with the existing internship model on farms in terms of the huge energy and capital cost for existing farmers and taking on interns, but also for aspiring farmers to step into that space and often with no income to learn from that farmer for a period of 1 to 2 years. That just isn't a viable economic proposition for a lot of people. Number 4, we sort of learned that there isn't a formal funding scheme sort of on a national scale or even on many state scales focused on creating pathways into regen ag, and that this is in pretty stark contrast with the funding situation in the USA and France, where there are sort of some very focused federal funding schemes on growing the next generation of farmers. Increasing risk that's associated with climate change. 86% of the beginner farmers we surveyed are experiencing unpredictable weather events that's requiring them to completely rethink their management practices. The 2018 Australian Rural Mental Health Study showed that drought-related stress is higher amongst young farmers, and that this is sort of going to be playing out more and more into the future, and we've been seeing that over the last couple of years with fires and drought. And then sort of another really interesting thing that we were able to tease out a bit more as well is around the social barriers and precedent, that there is a real challenge for aspiring and new farmers in moving away from their communities into rural areas where they often have to go to access land. There's also the social barrier of being an outsider to the farming community if you're not entering it from an existing farming family. And also for many aspiring farmers, there's a real lack of precedent of people who look like me, is what we heard through the survey, of people who don't fit the white male farming stereotype. So moving on from the challenges to the enablers, we heard that hands-on experience with farmers who are great at what they do, so those hands-on learning experiences are really vital for our next farming generation, but also being able to ensure that there is that intergenerational knowledge transfer through mentoring, matching with established farmers, and then really developing new ways of accessing land, tenure, ownership, and co-farming through initiatives like the Harcourt Farming Co-op, which Jules mentioned just before. That financial support for relevant and practical courses and capital startup costs is critical in order to make farming a more accessible pathway for people from non-traditional farming backgrounds. That we need assistance with navigating red tape and often the prohibitive costs of permits and regulations at a local government level. And that peer networks and community are vital for not just reducing social isolation, but also for peer-to-peer learning, accessing equipment, markets and infrastructure. And we also sort of learned through this process that there is some really great stuff happening on the ground in Australia. It's being driven often by community members and individual farmers in terms of on-farm internship and experience programs, farmer incubator type initiatives. And there's also a range of organisations working in the land access space. And both Sam and Joel will be speaking to that a bit later, I'm sure. I think the other sort of really, critical thing that comes up when we're talking about agriculture and land access in this space is that is a time of reckoning in Australian agriculture as we try to find a new way forward that acknowledges the truth of the settler colonial history and the work of repair. And we can't be talking about the challenges of land access and barriers to entering farming without squaring up to the fact that we are farming on land whose sovereignty was never ceded, and that agriculture was at the forefront of invasion, dispossession, genocide, and the lie of terra nullius in Australia. So there is a huge amount of work to do in this space in terms of looking at Indigenous land access and Indigenous farming in terms of land justice. But also, I think the focus that we learned through the interviews that we've been doing and the conversations that we've been having is that this isn't about Farmer Incubator or any other sort of white-led organisation stepping into this space. It's really about Indigenous agency and Indigenous self-determination and working alongside those organisations who are doing some really great work in this space. And I've listed a few here that we've been having conversations with. And I sort of highly recommend anyone who's really interested in this space to look them up and look at ways that they can be supported and enabled, because that's definitely a focus for Farmer Incubator moving forward as well. So sort of alongside the Australian context, we're also looking to learn from international models, and there's a wide range of work happening in this space. We found very quickly overseas. In America, there's over 100 farmer incubator programs in operation, supported by a national network. In France, they have a national farm incubator network that has more than 80 members with 45 operational incubator farms and a further 30 in development. And a national farm start network has been developed in the UK in response to sort of a burgeoning movement there. So because there was a lot of documentation and work and ease of access to contacts there, we really focused our interviews on learning from these people. So to date, we've done sort of 10 interviews with leading incubator farm models in the States and 3 incubator farm start national network orgs. And we sort of accompanied this focus on the international sort of stage with some desktop research. And I'm just going to sort of quickly point to a few of the really interesting models that we've been looking at and being inspired by through this process. So Terre de Liens in France, I'm sure I've pronounced that wrong, I don't speak French, but they've established and supported 200 farmers across 3,200 hectares of farmland that is permanently protected for farming in rural and peri-urban areas of France. Viva Farms are a more sort of straight up incubator farm model in Washington state, and they're really challenging the patterns of race and class in agriculture through providing bilingual training in holistic organic farming practices, as well as access to land, infrastructure, equipment, marketing and capital. And there's been some really interesting research that's looked at the impact of their work in terms of enabling more Latino migrants to move from being farm workers to farm owners. Soulfire Farms in New York are this incredible organisation that are running on-farm training programs that offer a BIPOC space for people to reconnect to soil, understand the history of food and justice, and acquire skills, re-establishing their relationship to food, land and farming. They've got a range of really interesting resources and things on their website, so if anyone's really interested, I recommend chasing them up. And then sort of moving out to look more at organisations that are addressing barriers around land access. The agrarian commons has evolved out of work by the Agrarian Trust and greenholds in the USA, and they've established locally governed land holding entities to support land access and tenure for next generation farmers in 10 states across the USA. They just launched this year. It's been co-founded with 12 farms representing 2,400 acres of diversified agriculture, with the express focus of making that available for next generation farmers. And then similarly, the Northeast Farmers of Colour Land Trust are working to advance land sovereignty in the Northeast region through permanent and secure land tenure for Indigenous, Black, Latinx and Asian farmers and land stewards. And that there's sort of some of those really big structural inequities around land access and land ownership are starting to be challenged through mechanisms like farmland trusts in the States, which we're sort of very interested in translating that into the Australian setting. So through conversations with these and other incubator models, we've learnt that in terms of structural barriers facing next generation farmers, incubator programs on their own aren't enough to address those barriers, because you can sort of equip someone really well with land for a few years and equipment and knowledge, but at some point they're going to have to step out of the incubator program and find land. And if that's inaccessible, then we're facing the same old problem. But incubator programs do play a pivotal role in addressing the initial barriers for individual participants and in launching farming careers. Financials are sort of a really tricky one, because of making land, tools and equipment accessible for young farmers isn't really a way to make money. So the way that sort of incubator programs are coming at this is accessing philanthropic and government funding, but they're also developing a diversity of revenue streams. And we've sort of looked at many different models doing many different things in different parts of the world. That building a network of organisations working in this space is really important in terms of building capacity and sharing knowledge and growing a presence on a national stage and starting to be able to have a bit of an influence on policy in a national conversation. So I've seen this happen in the UK and in France. And also in terms of addressing, structural issues and equity and land injustice in colonial settler nations, that initiatives really need to place this front and centre if they are going to make any meaningful headway on it, because otherwise it's very easy to just be perpetuating the age-old patterns that underpin agriculture and land access. So what does all of this mean for Farmer Incubator? So while we were sort of having all these conversations and doing this work, we were very much focused on actionable outcomes and next steps that Farmer Incubator itself could take. And we identified 3 crucial pathways that were sort of possible to take forward. And I think the sort of decision has been made that we want to do all of them, but at different stages and in different ways. So pathway 1 is really sort of drawing on our knowledge around the fact that there is limited funding in Australia in this space at the moment, and that we really need to sort of develop lean ways of incubating farmers. So we've actually received funding, and Jules is going to be leading the work of developing this lean pilot of developing farm-based incubators working with existing farmers and landholders on farms, placing sort of a new farmer to be incubated alongside those farms, utilising existing infrastructure, bringing in sort of mobile farm start infrastructure, and developing sort of distribution networks around that young farmer, and sort of looking to develop a cluster, and then over time to have a model of land access and farmer incubation that can be replicated and adapted by different communities right across Australia. So if you want to sort of learn more about that or be involved, get in touch with Jules, because of that's sort of, we had confirmed funding for that in the last couple of weeks, and that's underway and happening, which is very exciting. So pathway 2, which we're calling the whole hog, is really sort of where we do ultimately want to be accessing a permanent site of land to have a land-based incubator co-farm program. And so this is sort of a slow burn process that we're going to be developing over time in terms of accessing the land and finding the right site to do that. But the aim is, again, that this will be, having this up and running will enable more of these kinds of programs to be seeded in other parts of Australia and adapted in other ways. And pathway 3, which also came through really strongly through our research, is that we really need to start to get at the structural issues that we're facing. And so Farm Incubator can't lead this work on our own, but we want to work alongside partners to develop a coalition and national action plan to address the key structural challenges facing our next gen growers. And that's sort of, we've got funding applications in for both Pathway 2 and Pathway 3 at the moment. And just sort of in closing, I wanted to point quickly to sort of the bigger global picture and why this work is so important. And the Food and Land Use Coalition's report last year, based on their global consultation, looking at the 10 critical transitions to transform food and land use, underpinning sort of all of those 10 critical transitions was a pathway they identified called Stronger Rural Livelihoods. And the core part of that was focused on training and equipping a new generation of farming entrepreneurs and building a coalition of philanthropy, government, and public sort of support to make this happen. And I think sort of that there's sort of some really interesting economic sort of indicators and evidence that underpins all of that for people who want to dig a bit more into that international context. And sort of, I guess, just to sort of bring this all in and wrap it up, I think, you know, I keep returning to this quote around the fact that our break with nature came with agriculture, but also if we look at the settler colonial context of Australia, a huge amount of what was perpetuated here on Indigenous land in terms of both, you know, ecological degradation, dispossession, genocide, was also sort of pinpointed and begun by agriculture. So there's a huge amount of healing that we have to do. And our research has pointed out to the fact that, yes, it's fitting that agriculture takes the lead on this, and we have a next generation of farmers who are really determined to do this, who are very sort of wanting to work alongside and support Indigenous landholders and to heal the land with their own farming practices. But doing this sort of, you know, this sort of deep healing work is not something that our next generation of farmers can do on their own, that we can do on our own. We really sort of need all parts of society to work with us and support us if we are going to dismantle what is old and build something new. And sort of the final sort of point there of ways to contact us, and I wanted to do just a quick shout out to the funders who really made all this work possible, and the broader Farmer Incubator crew, research team, advisory board, and Sam and Joel, who've been a core part of developing this research along the way. So yeah, that's sort of the Farmer Incubator story to date, and I'll stop sharing my screen.
Amazing. That's so fantastic, Tanya. Thanks so much for that. Absolutely fascinating, and congratulations on a really exceptional piece of research, and also to Julia and the whole Farmer Incubator crew on, you know, some outstanding work that you've been doing, and, you know, really blazing a trail in this very important area of supporting and creating pathways for young people to enter agriculture. You know, absolutely inspiring and fantastic what you put together there. And I'm so glad that you've made the time available this morning to share it with us. Really, really wonderful. Also really glad that you highlighted some really important issues about settler colonialism and the question of relations with First Nations people in Australia, and those, you know, those big sort of structural challenges and questions, you know, that really do need to be addressed and need to be addressed collectively, and we do need to come together as a movement of people and organisations across the country who are really motivated by a vision and agenda of a better food and farming system for all of us. So 100% with you on that, and thank you for really foregrounding that in your presentation as well. So with that, I'm going to now pass over to Sam Marwood. So Sam is a community-driven problem solver from Central Victoria, from Kyneton, as we heard, who's redefining the farming and agriculture industry. Sam's got a background in environmental science and social entrepreneurship, and spent his early years as a policy advisor to the Victorian government before connecting to his roots, farming and all things to do with the environment. In 2016, Sam recognised an emerging farming problem. Retiring farmers were simply selling off vast amounts of property, and with it, a deep understanding of farming. And all the while, young aspiring farmers, as we just heard, found it near impossible to acquire the capital and acute knowledge to begin a new generation of farmers. So the answer, Cultivate Farms, a matchmaker for retiring farmers and want-to-be farmers alike. Since its launch, Cultivate Farms have nurtured many new farming partnerships across Australia, with the first of its kind in Albury, now operating as Hicks Country Beef. So over to you, Sam.
Nick, thank you very much, and thank you to Georgia as well and Sustain for pulling this together. And loved hearing from Tanya and Julia, and looking forward to Joel as well. We talk all the time around this issue of how do we back the next generation of farmers. Hopefully, some of you have heard about us before, and I wanted to honour your time by giving you something a little bit different to what I normally present on. So if you go online, you'll see my buff head everywhere on YouTube. Well, on our YouTube anyway. We've got a lot of videos trying to give content and free content to you as aspiring farmers that's saying it is possible to own your farm. And I'll give you some background around why we're looking to this through this presentation. But the purpose of this presentation is I want to be a bit provocative. I've had 5 years with Tim and Teagan, the co-founders, hearing from aspiring farmers, retiring farmers, investors, communities, ag industry. And I was thinking, well, imagine if I did a presentation pretending I was someone wanting to own a farm and farm, because I am just not a farmer. I got kicked off our family farm because I think I'm useless. But I love the idea of backing other farmers, and that's, I guess, my passion. So I'm thinking I'll write this as if I were an aspiring farmer. I wanted to own my farm, and that's what I'm going to go through here. Hopefully there's a bunch of practical, maybe a little bit cheeky, a bit out there ideas, but I want to provoke you and say it is possible. Don't sit around thinking it is impossible. Absolutely, it's possible to own your farm if that is your vision. And ownership, we can unpack what we mean by ownership, but I can't go through everything in 15 minutes. And hopefully this is a taster to keep you going with your farm ownership dreams. And glad Tanya and Julia could talk first, because they've set the scene really beautifully with that research they've been working on, which is amazing. So the outline, I'll talk about Cultivate Farms. I'll then go through if I were an aspiring farmer, and really the main point of this, I want to give you a stack of practical ideas that you can implement right now. So make sure you get your phones out, write down, type. Hopefully there's a few bits of gold here that you can pick up and run with if you do want to own your farm. The key points I'm going to emphasize throughout is that you need to be farm ready. If you want to own a farm, that's a big ask. To get there, and I'll talk about, is being matched with people. Either you go and make millions of dollars, that's one way, which is pretty hard. The other way is to share ownership. So you need to get out in front of retiring farmers, investors, and they're the ones who can back you and co-own a farm with you. But you've got to be good enough. So make sure you're farm ready. The second point is about writing. You need to know what you want to do. You need to have a plan around the model farm that you've wanted for your whole life. You need a 30-page document outlining why you're the best, how it's going to make money, a 5-year financial model. Writing things down is so powerful. I can't emphasize that enough. That is, I'm annoying to all our aspiring farmer members. Write, get a plan down. Why would anyone back you if you don't know what you want to do? And then with that, you'll have confidence to go open doors. There are people sitting on farms across the country who don't know you exist, and they would love nothing more than to share their farm with you or to invest with you. They just don't know about you because you haven't written a document, and maybe you're not quite farm ready either. So do those two things and go open doors. So Cultivate Farms, we started this, as Nick said, in 2016 to solve our own problems. So Tim and Teagan are the co-founders and good friends of mine, and Tim said one day, all I want to do is own a farm. But I'm not a millionaire. Imagine if there was a business that helped to buy farms for young people. And I went, yes, where is that? Then where is it? And so we Googled, there's nothing we could find across the world. And we still don't think there's anything quite like the solution we've got across the country and across the world. And we try to figure out, well, what does that mean? How do you own a farm unless you inherit it? And the solution, and we never set out to create a matchmaking service, but that was the solution. It's matching people together to own a farm. And we did think about calling this eFarmony. That's my running joke, but we stuck with Cultivate Farms, and it is at the very, we are matchmakers is how we show this. And our aim is to talk to aspiring farmers, retiring farmers and investors, and let them know about the power of sharing ownership. And again, we can talk about the technical details of what that means later, but there's plenty of lawyers and accountants who can help with that sort of thing. Our goal, though, is to connect an aspiring and retiring farmer who want to have the same values and want to share ownership, or an aspiring farmer and investor who want to co-own a farm together, or all three together. So whatever combination, we don't care. Our goal is to match like-minded people together. And it is focused on relationships. It is like getting married. You need to make sure you're really committed and you want to do this, because selling your farm and walking away in one way is really easy, because you don't have to worry about a relationship ongoing. But because you're sharing, that relationship is so central. So there's a photo of Tim and Teagan and their 4 kids. Our mission, a lot of what we do is breaking down barriers, and that's mental barriers. So probably some of you are sitting there going, as if I can own my farm. Didn't we just hear that it's expensive and I'm not a multi-millionaire? So we think it is possible, and mainly it's around breaking down your mental barriers and these excuses and these ideas you have that it's not possible because you haven't seen someone else do it. We are making these matches. There are big things coming. You've got to be ready. So we spend most of the time creating content, talking to people and saying, oh, what if you tried this? What if you do this? Why put a no in someone else's mouth? People say, no, I can't ask for that. I can't talk to that retiring farmer. As if they would want to back me. It's like, well, have you asked them? So a lot of that is, so they're breaking down the barriers is what we do. Our momentum, we've got an online database of 1,200 aspiring farmers. So please jump on there if you want to farm. We do have investors and retiring farmers headhunting on that platform. I had an email last night. Can I contact this person? I'd like to invest in a farm with them. So please get your profile up there. It's pretty easy and it's straightforward. And we use that to send to our retiring farmers and investors. We've made 14 matches. We've got about 25 ready to be matched. We've got a cultivator program, which is, we've got an investor who's ready to back another farmer. They've already backed one farmer. We've got 10 farmers at the moment pulling a pitch together, and that investor will back one of those 10. And hopefully we'll get more investors, I'm pretty confident, over the next few months. Attention is growing. People are finding out about us even across the world. We're solving a problem, the biggest problem we think in regional Australia, which is keeping young people on the land and attracting them. And ownership is the biggest driver, and they can't do it. So we're helping to solve it. And then this last one here, investors are uncovered. Like, there are people all over the country. Your next door neighbor might be an investor. Your parents, there's equity crowdfunding. There's money everywhere that is available. People just don't know about it, and that you need to be the one to tell them and be ready for those people who could potentially back you. So I'm going to talk about, what would I do if I wanted to own a farm, given I've learned all this and seen all these case studies and helped pull these deals together. So why would I be so confident? It's because I only need to convince one retiring farmer. How many farmers are there in Australia? 80,000 or something like that. I've just got to convince one of them that I'm good enough and to share ownership. And so I'm going to be out there hustling to find 100 of them and meet them and build a real relationship, so that hopefully one of them one day will want to share their ownership and do a vendor finance deal or a lease to buy. I would be so confident because this is what I want. I'm not going to let anyone stop me chase this dream. And that's what I find so often. People are like, oh, I'm worried about what other people are going to say. How much do you want it? Why let other people stop your dream? And that's what I would be very, very confident that I want it. I want to deal with the hassle of getting up at 3 a.m. and pulling carbs or whatever it is. I want it. And now that's going to drive me to keep doing it. I'll be confident also because there are people with money. There is money available. This isn't about just matching with anybody, and finding those investors isn't easy as well. But I know it's out there, and I'll make sure I'd find someone whose values aligned and likes me. And I've seen others succeed. So there are case studies out there. We're trying to highlight them. These matches, these things happen all the time without us. We're trying to get them. Farmers are they're not very boastful people. So getting their stories is tricky, but we're trying to get as many stories to show you that you can share ownership and you can own your farm. So how am I going to do it? I'm going to get farm ready. I'm going to be persistent. I'm going to be annoying. I'm going to be at every dinner party telling people I'm going to own a farm so the opportunities come to me. But also I'm going to be patient. I know this is going to take years, but every day I'm going to wake up trying to think of a way to get onto my farm. What I want to co-own a business and land. So that's my goal. I want to be able to buy the land and part of the business and increase my equity over time. I want 5,000 acres in central Victoria. That's northern, central Victoria. I don't really want this, but I'm just trying to show what your vision might be. And I know I've got to convince retiring farmers. I want to find a farmer who's willing to share ownership and me to buy in a little bit and run the business with them. Or I'd like an investor, someone who I know, who I've built a relationship with, or who's found out about me and wants to back me. I want to convince farm advisors. They're the ones who know all the farmers in the district, know all the retirement age farmers. And I want to know community champions who are there wanting to support their community. And I'll be telling them, you can support your community by backing me and use me as a case study to get other young people and next generation farmers onto the land. There are 3 sort of tactics I'll go through. One's farming. I want to become the best farmer. I want to learn from the best. I'll be Googling, YouTubing, out there practicing, trying things. I have a farm job working for someone who's the best as well, and build my skills to prove to others that I will rock up every day and work hard and show people I want it. People talk about you and word gets around, and people know you're a really hard worker. Opportunities will come. I will lease a small farm I don't care how big it is. I want to show that I'm putting my own money on the line. I can invest in myself. Why would anyone want to invest in you if you won't invest in yourself? I'm going to put money away. I'm going to show I can save and run a business, because that is going to be proof why someone should back you. I might even invest with another farmer. I'll go buy a herd, or I'll back a garlic farm, or whatever it is, but invest with others who might have access to land that you might not. And I would volunteer for my idol. I would get on YouTube and Instagram. I'd follow those farmers across Australia that I love. And then I'd just say, hey, can I come volunteer for you? They'd say yes, because you're not asking for money. And I'd learn so much about them and what they're doing. And I'd get their contacts, and more doors would open. And apologies for the speed, but I just want to pump this into you, and hopefully some of these things can click and we can chat after. Next thing, I would write a pitch. We've got a farm pitching template on our website. I can send it to you, a Word document, and it helps you outline what you need to show to someone why a particular farm would be good enough. I would pick a farm, my ideal farm, doesn't matter if it's a sale or not. I would write about it. I would say why I'm the best and how it's going to work. And I'd do a 5-year financial model. And I'd maybe even set up a board. So I get my accountant, a lawyer, a farm advisor, and I'd say every 6 months, I want to catch up with you and help me pull this along. And to tell people I've got my own board, even without a farm, to show I've got a team behind me. Then finding farms. The next one is, how do you find farms? You know, it is hard to find a lease. It's hard to find someone who wants to back you, but you can, and it does happen. And a lot of this would be, well, the way I'd probably go about it is documenting my journey. I'd get on my iPhone, I'd be doing webinars like this, and I'd be going, here I am out in the paddock today. I'm looking at the grazing regime for the year. And then every now and then I'll talk about, hey, I want to get my own farm. I get a following of 300 people. That's all I need. And constantly create content to get to the audience so they know that I'm after a farm. And one day someone will find out about it. People will talk about me. I'll get a call from someone to say, I've seen you, you cheeky little bugger. I think you're great. I want to back you onto my farm. How about it? I'd do Facebook ads. I'd interview retiring farmers and create content. I'd ask farmer questions online. I'd use Facebook Marketplace. What a ripper thing that is. You should be putting a post up saying you want a farm. I'd do newspaper ads. I'd interview farming champions, again, creating content and getting my name out there. And I'd comment on farming content on Twitter all the time, provide advice and value, and get my name out there so people know about me, so that I have more chance of someone offering me a farm or backing me. You've probably got heaps of excuses around what's holding you back, and I want to get rid of them. There might be someone in your life who thinks you shouldn't be a farmer and is knocking you and pulling you down. How do you get new friends, move them on so you've got the right people alongside you to follow this dream? Because it's a big, bold dream, but you need people alongside you to help you get through there. You might say with social media, that content, that idea around documenting my journey is crazy because no one's on social media. Everyone is on social media. That is where attention is, and it's free. You might not be good enough, or maybe you're not, and maybe you need to work harder and spend 5 years building your skills. But why compare yourself to someone else? There might be that a retiring farmer loves you because of your attitude compared to someone who has more skill. Who knows? Again, don't put the no in someone else's mouth. Get out there and ask. You're worried about comments, what people say about you. Say, oh, I've seen you online trying to get a farm, as if you're going to get a farm. Again, I would, it probably hurts, but I'll be like, well, I want a farm and I'm going to make it happen. Get out of my way. You don't know how to write a pitch. I don't think anyone was born writing pitches. You'll learn, you'll get there. There's people to help you write that. You don't have the time, stop watching Netflix. I don't know any retiring farmers. Drive down driveways, ask people, find retiring farmers. And I don't know rich people. Again, there are people with money everywhere. You never know where they are. Unless you ask, you won't uncover them. Get out there and promote yourself. I think this is the key. How much do you want this? Hopefully you realize it is absolutely possible. It's about convincing one person to back you. And if you really, 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 really want this, then there really shouldn't be anything stopping you making this happen. It won't happen overnight. It could take years, but the chances are it can happen. Key points: get farm ready, write a pitch document, go on our website, download it, get a 5-year model, use P2P Agri. It's a great platform for financial modeling, and get out there and open doors and go get your farm. Thanks, gang.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Sam. That was really uplifting and inspiring. I love your positivity. I love your practical suggestions. I love what you've done, what you've achieved with Cultivate Farms. Absolutely fantastic and inspiring. And thanks for sharing all of that with us today. Really brilliant. It reminds me of something I saw years ago when I went traveling about face your fears and live your dreams. We've got one life and we've got to seize it with both hands and make the most of it. And that's, I can see what that's all you're all about, and helping other people to do exactly that. And overcome that little voice in the head saying no, to get past that and to believe in yourself and back yourself in and bring other people with you, and you're there to support people to do that, which is absolutely amazing and fantastic. So thank you very much indeed. Brilliant. So now we're going to wrap up with another real leader and champion, someone of my great leader in this space who's been working in creating futures for young farmers across the country, and particularly up in the Northern Rivers of New South Wales, where he's based. And that's Joel Orchard, the owner and creator of Future Feeders and 3Ps Advisory Consulting on small-scale farms, sustainable food systems, agroecology, urban agriculture, and community resilience. Future Feeders facilitates a suite of projects that provide links between business producers and the local agricultural industry. Joel is the co-founder and director of Young Farmers Connect, which is a national organisation cultivating networks, resources and community for young farmers. YFC drives support advocacy programs by delivering research and creating social capital to promote success and prosperity for new agrarians. So over to you, Joel, take it away.
Thank you very much, Nick, and thank you all for having me. Thanks Tanya and Julia and Sam for pretty much laying the groundwork here. I'm sort of wondering what else I've got to say. But I guess Young Farmers Connect really is about connection. And I think what we have tried to do is identify the other amazing work that's already going on the ground and not reinvent those wheels, but try to find a place where we can amplify and support that existing or those existing projects and really build on a community of support for young farmers. But before I go into this, I certainly would like to acknowledge that I live, work and play on Bundjalung country, which is a nation of 15 tribal groups that goes from the Clarence River at Grafton all the way over the southeast Queensland border up and around to the Gold Coast. And I think why that's particularly important, and it's certainly been touched on, is that from my perspective and talking with a lot of young farmers around Australia, there is certainly a new sense of awareness around our relationship with land, and the First Nations people provide us with a really rich framework to have that understanding. And I think increasingly there's a real drawing to bring in the traditional owners into our community of practice and to build on their wealth of wisdom and knowledge in understanding seasons and natural patterns, and certainly living and working on country. So I'm just going to run through a little bit of what we do at Young Farmers Connect, sort of where we've come from, who we are, what we do, and pretty much where we're going. But fundamentally, we're an organisation that's about connection. We celebrate young farmers' connection to land, and we also provide a space where they can connect to each other. We are trying to provide a community of collaboration that really works through a peer support network. We were a sort of a separate number of clusters of young farmers that were active predominantly up and down the east coast of Australia a couple of years ago. And at the beginning of 2019, we created a national association, Young Farmers Connect, to try and bring together, I guess, those support groups and also streamline a few of the services and offer, I guess, sort of a greater collective impact to young farmer members through that group. And it's great to see there's a couple of Young Farmer Connect members in the chat today, and hopefully we'll see a few more of you involved in the network into the future. So there, at the beginning of last year, we associated. We now provide, I guess, some sort of templates and resources for new chapters to emerge. We've got some more significant clusters of young farmer activity and active chapters. I'll run down them from north to south. So southeast Queensland, which sort of centres around the Brisbane Food Bowl, Northern Rivers, the mid-coast New South Wales, the Greater Sydney region or the Sydney Food Bowl, and now we're sort of really trying to ramp up activity around the Melbourne Food Bowl as well. And then there's a number of smaller groups which really only operate as online networks and peer support groups. So in the Coffs Coast area, southeast New South Wales, southern Tasmania, WA and South Australia. So really, I guess what we've tried to do is recognise that the culture of farming has always been quite an isolated profession, and we're really trying to refine and I guess rediscover what it means to be a farmer, to change some of those perceptions and culture norms. And I think Tanya touched on that. The changing face of a farmer in Australia is now no longer a lonely white old man in a paddock. There's a huge range of diversity and a new breed of farmer, I think. Certainly what we've seen in Young Farmers Connect is a predominance of young women entering in industry, which is really exciting. And I think it's really changing a whole range of dynamics around food production. I think it's really evident. And we certainly celebrate that as much as we can and provide additional support for other unique demographics to get involved. I think probably another important thing is that we've really recognised that, especially in focusing on the small scale farming sector, and mostly our members are involved in direct distribution farming as well, so direct to consumers, that a lot of young farmers are now moving into the industry from non-traditional farming backgrounds. So that would mean we're seeing a lot of people moving out of urban communities to rural areas and looking to start up enterprises and engage in a local food economy. And we're also seeing a growth, which is really exciting, and certainly plays to the work that Nick is doing in urban agriculture, peri-urban agriculture, and some really unique forms of farming, which probably haven't been highlighted in the past. Julia is a good example of that, and who would have thought someone could grow mushrooms in a shipping container in the middle of the city. There's models around urban farming and rooftop farming and all sorts of farming now that isn't what we have previously conceived as agriculture. So I think that's opening the doors for a whole range of different people to engage in the sector. And that diversity, I think, is providing us with new ways to view strength and resilience around food systems and food economies. So I guess just to talk to what we've been doing sort of over the last couple of years, the sort of big feature of Young Farmers Connect has been a series of field days. We, as an organisation, really try to provide as much agency and empowerment to the local chapters to operate in ways which are most meaningful to them. But the field days, which are basically opportunities for young farmers to come together and to hang out on each other's farms, they're coordinated so that there's a farm walk. Mostly the opportunity is really around networking, connecting, of course, socialising, building opportunities for collaborations. Those, I think, is what's really creating a new rich landscape for the way that young farmers work together. I think traditionally farming has always been quite a competitive industry, and I think there's an opportunity for us now to redefine the way we work together. We know that there's strength in numbers. We know that historically small-scale farming sector has been squeezed out by industrial agriculture and commodity farming, and this provides us an opportunity to really build a platform where we can support each other. And there's a whole range of reasons to do that, which I'll touch on. So I guess this sort of national peer support network that we're building really works predominantly through simple free platforms like Facebook groups. Those are opportunities for people to share ideas, share concerns, share opportunities, to ask questions of each other. We know that most of the resources and solutions to most of the small-scale farming problems are out there. There's not really any reason for people to reinvent those wheels. And typically we find that the best people to find solutions to our problems are our peers. So simply just asking questions of other local farmers around us elicits generally the best and simplest results, rather than having to look too much further afield. And we really do advocate that when somebody comes up with a great idea or a solution, that they share it with everyone so that we all learn together. The field days are really also a great place just for learning about different types of operations. And what we do encourage is that, I guess, as a network that supports more in the aspiring and young farmer community, rather than what probably Sam is focusing on, which are young farmers that have some experience and are looking to take their operation to the next level. We really want to provide that sort of first place of contact for someone who's thinking about engaging in the industry, that wants to understand what farming looks like, what might be required to start a farm, to talk to other farmers. And those kind of face-to-face opportunities really provide that kind of community of support and are a great place for people to engage personally and directly. We're also sort of starting to layer those field days with workshop activities, getting in guest speakers to talk around a whole range of issues that we know are really important to startup farmers, things like financial literacy and business support and marketing. And then also, I guess, there's opportunities for looking at partnering with other organisations like local land services or other land care groups that are now providing great workshops on regenerative farming and soil health and agroecology. So we're looking at linking in with services that are already provided, or where local chapters find that there's a skills shortage, we can invest in providing dedicated support services to ensure that everybody's skills are growing quickly. There's a kind of, I guess, a suite of projects that we're looking at really investing our resources in probably over the next 12 to 24 months. So I'll just sort of run through a few of those things. Predominantly, we are focused on creating, I guess, stories and building on narrative. So we're really looking at how do we share the successes of young farmers? How do we use those stories to inspire more people to get into the industry? We use, I guess, a range of the social media platforms to share those stories. We gather those stories by developing small case studies and offering platforms for young farmers to share their experience. We're looking at a range of sort of media connections with organisations that provide a voice for younger people, just generally. Organisations like the Foundation for Young Australians. This year, we're also partnering with a group that's based out of Melbourne that put together a really lovely sustainability publication called Sowing Seeds, and they're going to put together a feature magazine for us, focusing on sharing stories and issues for young farmers, centered around, I guess, concerns for climate change, the shifting market as a result of, pandemics and COVID, honing in on some of those land access and financial access issues, and talking around market share and their concerns for moving the industry forward, specifically for the small scale farming sector. We've looked at a couple of opportunities around provisions for microfinancing and low interest loans for startup farmers. As has already been discussed, there's some real barriers for new farmers to find, especially that startup capital to get enterprises going. So finding ways that we can look at supporting with finance for those sort of key pieces of infrastructure which make small scale farms, which are typically done on a real human scale, just a bit more efficient and effective, so that young farmers can be both productive, aren't busting their bodies up within the first 5 years and walking away broken people, and also making sure that they're financially effective and can be competitive in the marketplace. We're looking at sort of key infrastructure elements to go with those packages, things like cool rooms and walk behind tractors. I might just share on the screen here now. So this is a package that we've looked at developing, and I guess sort of plays into this notion of looking at building sort of informal cooperatives for our young farmer chapters, and looking at having shared tools and resources like a tool library that can be hired out to members, or then even could be used to hire out to the broader community. But there's sort of core tools which are often too expensive for a startup farmer to afford on their own, but are really key to enhancing the operation and moving it forward to a point where they can then finance their own. So these kind of tools really are game changers for young farmers. I also had to share with you. So this, I guess, is just a few pictures of what a field day kind of looks like. So this was a Young Farmer Connect Southeast Queensland chapter field day at a farm just outside of Brisbane called Loop Growers. So, great group of people getting together, sharing ideas. We walked through the entire operation. We had a few hours to talk to them about the nuts and bolts of their farm operation, their soil management techniques, their distribution models, their marketing platform, the way they communicate to their customers. It was a real ins and outs opportunity. And then, of course, we all get together and share lunch and have a few beers at the end of the day as well. So these are opportunities really to get a clear understanding of what a small scale farm looks like it's illuminating and inspiring for people that are already farming in this sort of systems, but also young farmers that are thinking about entering into the sector. Another platform which we developed this year is an education fund. So we've partnered with a range of training providers which align strongly with our values around agroecology and regenerative farming. And we're now able to offer either discounts to access these training services in holistic management, regenerative farming, and also a number of conferences that became available. We were able to give some of our members complimentary scholarships to attend. And we also work with local government and local land services also to access funding to offset the costs of some of these workshops. Because we know, especially in regional Australia, a lot of the access to funding to support young farmers or farmers in general to these training is tied to land ownership. And a lot of our young farmers aren't landowners, they're land sharers. So they're often, there's a barrier to accessing this kind of training. As Tanya's also talked about, we've been looking at alternative land access models. So things like farmland trust. We've done probably some equivalent research around farm incubated models as well. We've put together a few proposals for a farm incubation platform up here in the Northern Rivers. We're working on a collaborative project for a farm incubation project in the Coffs Coast, one in Brisbane as well. So I think this is beginning to become a model where we're understanding that this is a really fundamentally important way to support young farmers to enter into the industry, which de-risks the startup phase. It offers financial equity in being able to get going into the industry, and a community of support so that it's not an enormously steep learning curve for these young farmers, and they can build systems of understanding by working together. And also, I think there's a real value in exploring these kind of multi-enterprise dynamic versions of farming. I guess Joel Salatin and the Polyface Farm sort of really popularized this idea of stacking enterprises on one piece of land for ecological benefits, nutrition cycling benefits, cost-saving benefits, and really building a community of support. So, you know, I guess that identifies that idea of running chickens and beef and eggs and vegetables and mushrooms all in one space can be done with a whole range of enterprises working together. And of course, you know, then focusing on things like circular economies. We're looking also, I guess, at building some supportive digital assets. There's been a real calling for dedicated services and an understanding of lease agreements and building templates. How do young farmers engage with existing farmers on a lease basis? It's not unique to the Northern Rivers, but I've been focusing here now that we're seeing an enormous amount of the farmland change hands to predominantly city folk and tree changers that kind of have lost the idea of what share farming looks like. Then there's no support for these new landowners to understand how to build relationships with young people that might want to work the land if they're happy to own the land and see it just become more productive. And often that looks like just offering produce or some sort of financial return, so everybody benefits. We're also looking at building tools for marketing support. We know through quite a lot of the research that we did, and I'll share the screen again. So in 2018, we did, is that on your screen? I think so. So we did a body of research with the New South Wales Department of Primary Industries Young Farmer Business Program, understanding the small scale farming sector. And what that really clearly demonstrated was the type of young farmers that are already engaged in the industry and where some of the skills gaps were. And what came back really clearly was financial literacy, marketing literacy, and business development support. So those, I guess, are the three key areas that we're focusing on: building resources and building on relationships with existing organizations so that we can funnel those services and support back down to the ground for young farmers. But certainly that marketing toolkit was something which came back really strongly as being needed to be invested in. So I think I can scroll. There we go. So yeah, obviously you can see it's there. There's a really great report with all of the details of the surveys that were completed on the Young Farmer Business Program website that's publicly available. So it's probably worth going there and checking it out if you're interested just in understanding, one, the barriers, and two, some of the suggestions that were made to support young farmers in that industry. And I guess sort of finally, I guess, building on this idea of collective impact, I really believe that by providing these vehicles for young farmers to come together as communities of support where they can have face-to-face interaction really is what's going to provide strength and resilience to the emerging small-scale farming sector. And it really has to happen, I think, through direct connection and collaboration. This is, I guess, is a really good example of we can use technology to connect with each other from around the country, but the value in having platforms where face-to-face and community building can happen again, because sometimes we forgot that that's a necessary way of building and developing relationships. So providing these communities, these Young Farmer Connect chapters with value to build bulk purchasing agreements so that they can save on costs by buying things together. We're looking at buying group public liability insurance packages so that members can access discounts. Obviously the tool libraries and finding ways that we can build collective asset ownership. I mean, the cases of how many farmers have got tractors and machinery that sits in sheds 300 days of the year, which really could be rotated around a farming community so that everyone could benefit from that shared use of assets, I think is fundamental to resource recovery and cost cutting for the small scale farming sector. I guess I don't really have a whole lot more to add, given that there's been quite a lot covered already. I think probably what's more valuable is questions. But yeah, I implore everyone to have a look on our website at Young Farmers Connect. It runs through, I guess, our guiding principles and what the fundamental parts which are important to us, and the values that we want to support in the emerging sustainable food systems. And yeah, I look forward to fielding some of your questions. Thank you.
Fantastic, Joel. Thanks so much. And as Tanya just wrote in the chat, and I absolutely echo this from my years of knowing and observing and also supporting your work and Young Farmers Connect. Tanya says, just wants to do a shout out to Joel that he's pretty much made all this happen, founding YFC and chapters and subsequent activity by pretty much no funding, through hard work, strategic thinking and heart, playing such a pivotal role in this space. Absolutely true. And so much more that you're involved in and doing, and you're a real leader in this space and somebody that I have a huge amount of time for and admire greatly, and thank you for making yourself available this morning to share all that fantastic work with us. And yeah, just kind of reflecting on Tanya and Julia and Sam and Joel, I think what it's kind of pointing to is through the work that Joel's just described with Young Farmers Connect, is about building a new narrative about agriculture and food systems in Australia, and a bigger sort of cultural shift that is about collaboration, is about connection, is about cooperation, is about working together, co-farming, shared infrastructure, shared resources, co-ownership, helping people overcome barriers. And it's really, I think, a bigger sort of cultural shift and cultural transformation paradigm shift that we need to go through, which is going past this really phase of individualism, intense individualism, and the idea that life is a journey that you pursue on your own in isolation, and you make it or break it on your own. It's absolutely, it's never been true, but it doesn't serve us to kind of like hold on to that anymore. And everything that we've heard today and all the work that's embodied is about sort of transforming that and showing that we're going to go where we need to get to by walking together and supporting each other and cooperating, and absolute admiration for all of you and what you're doing. So on that note, there are a few questions and comments and observations being made in the chat. So George, might pass over to you now to have a look at those.
Thank you, Nick, and thank you to all of our speakers. First question I have is from Jason, and it's addressed to Joel, but I guess it's probably one that would be good if everyone had an answer to. Are there any Indigenous groups or people that actually do education on bush tucker plants?
I can start with an answer if you like. I have done some work directly on a number of projects in that space specifically. I would say that there's not an enormous amount of good case studies to draw on. There are some projects that have made some attempts and made some progress in part, but there are an enormous amount of barriers to the Indigenous community for a whole range of reasons. And that is going to be a problem that I think is going to require an enormous amount of investment in resources to support. There's organisations such as the Indigenous Land and Sea Corporation that certainly have provided investment and business development support for some of these projects, typically on a much larger scale. There's some great examples of products being developed in partnership with that organisation in far northern Queensland and the Northern Territory. The Kakadu plum industry is probably a good example of that. I know specifically here in the Northern Rivers, there's been a couple of projects that have attempted to provide training and support to the Indigenous community in horticulture industries with a focus on the bush foods industry. But I think probably what's very important to note is that for the entire native foods industry supply chain, Indigenous ownership sits below 1%. So there's a lot of work to be done. Unfortunately, I do not see that there's many simple solutions, but that certainly does not mean that we should not be trying harder.
Thank you, Joel.
I wouldn't mind. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. Thanks, Natalie.
No, I just wanted to talk to that. I think that it's really important that we go back to honouring and cultivating our Indigenous plants, to honour the plants that are suitable for our local environment. From a climate emergency perspective, and council, Darwin plants from a climate emergency perspective, bushmead workshops during NAIDOC week, more to support or aimed at local food, backyard food growers, and I think it's just important that we remember to employ Indigenous peoples more to support backyard food growers, and to employ Indigenous people making money, Aboriginal knowledge. Yeah, so that's just a consideration that we have in mind when we organise that sharing of knowledge.
Thank you, Natalie. The line is not fantastic. So if there are any links you can send through to me, I can make sure I get them out to everyone who's attending as well.
Cool.
Alrighty. Ready to move on to the next question? Yep. Okay. So from Rach, what's the number one thing that local government can do to support young farmers? You might have to dip into this one as well, Natalie. Sam, would you like to start? I see you've got your mute off.
I've got plenty of ideas. Great question, Rach. I think number one, we're doing this already with a few communities, is to set up a farmer group backed by or started by aspiring farmers who would love to own a farm, and use those motivated next gen farmers to regularly catch up and just discuss, you know, all these ideas we're talking about here now, and showing that your council is open for farming and encouraging people to collaborate, talk, kick around this sharing ownership. It's just through these discussions and meeting people that you go, oh, maybe I could, you know, retiring farmer might come along and say, oh yeah, I could share ownership of my farm, or I've got this opportunity, and momentum would build. But if that was facilitated by the council, that'd be super powerful, and something we're going to start pushing and encouraging more is, you know, locals. And and driven by the aspiring farmers. If you're the ones who want to own this farm, get out there and make groups like this happen.
Thanks, Sam. Joel?
Yeah, I can add to that, and exactly as Sam has mentioned there, and probably a conversation Sam and I can have to look at how we can build some more capacity there. But definitely through our Young Farmer Connect chapters, it's already become a really powerful place for us as collectives of young farmers to advocate for our needs specifically with local government. In the Northern Rivers, we had some really great success working with a number of the 7 LGAs here, directly accessing funds, resources and services from local government to provide training sessions, and we've used a number of their community grants to provide workshops directly targeting sustainable farming systems and engaging workshops and thought leaders in that space. We are now called on in the Northern Rivers to provide feedback on rural land use strategies. The Tweed Council, for instance, has a sustainable agriculture strategy that we're providing some guidance on. So that they're now offering us places as established organisations that we can provide feedback and commentary to ensure that our voices are being heard. I know the Mid Coast chapter has also had some success in that area, and probably now into the Greater Sydney chapter, where we're developing a bit more recognition as well and working with local land services, being able to have the same sort of capacity to offer advice to local governments in developing strategic planning for urban development to ensure that there's urban farms and green spaces, looking at different policies that need to be adapted so that we can see economic potential of green spaces getting used rather than just for parklands. So yeah, I think there's a range of ways that we can work with local government, but I guess it's ensuring that there's opportunities that are provided for voice is the most important part.
I might just invite Lisa Brassington, who I think is still on the call, who has a role as the collective impact facilitator for Cardinia Food Circles Project, Cardinia Shire Council. I know, Lisa, you made a comment on this in the chat, but you might want to quickly have something to say if you're still there.
Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yep. My first advice on top of Joel and Sam is find out how food friendly your council is. If you're going to look to be a young farmer in a district, it's always great to see if you're in a council that's food and farmer friendly to begin with. And then if they do have a food policy, or someone that has a title of food or ag, get in touch with
Lisa, your line's a bit
them
wavy.
because they're passionate, usually have the job because they love it and they want to help. Very welcome to contact any of us today. Did that help, Nick? Sorry.
Okay, great. Oh yeah, that yeah, it was a little bit. You disappeared for a bit and you came back. But just to pick up what I think you were saying is, yeah, see if the council has got somebody with designated role and responsibility for food and agriculture, and get in touch with them as your first point of contact, and find somebody friendly in the council who's going to be on your side. I think that's really, really great advice, because yeah, councils like bureaucracies can sometimes be intimidating places to navigate, and having someone friendly who's in your corner is really, really important. I'm sure Lisa would be happy to take any kind of like direct questions. We can leave Lisa's details, and anyone who wants to know more about the work that we've been doing. Max Godber's here as well from the Cardinia Food Movement, the Cardinia Food Circles Project, as a collaboration between a community food organisation and producers, and building a whole food movement over, you know, a long-term vision over many years. You know, come and talk to us about that. We know other councils are interested in that kind of collaborative, collective impact form of working on food systems and agricultural change. All right, any other questions, George?
We do have a couple more. The next one I had on the list, which Lisa has already responded to as well, but I think it's probably a question that could be broader. So it's from Zach. I live on the Mornington Peninsula, and there's a lot of underutilised land held as holiday/weekender for the wealthy. Is there a way of creating incentives for the landowner in granting access for young farmers to this land?
I can jump in. I've been looking around that area for a long time, and there's probably similar sort of landscapes across Australia and outside of main cities. There are landholders there who love the idea of backing next generation farmers. They just don't know about you. So we're trying to find ways to get some case studies and then just promote that as much as possible to encourage others. But there's people there who are probably independently wealthy. They've got this farm because they just like the idea of looking after the land, and so they're probably not after a return. They just want someone to farm it well. So drive up driveways, find ways to get in contact. I wouldn't wait for others.
And Mornington, I'll try and find a link. Mornington Peninsula are a friendly council, increasingly so, I think, in this area, because they're just in the process now of developing an agroecology strategy for the Mornington Peninsula, which I think will be one of the first such strategies of its kind in Australia. There's a consultation that's going to be happening right now. So if you are in the Mornington Peninsula, if you're interested at all in the next generation of farmers, local food economies, regenerative agriculture, all those kinds of things, I will put the link in right now. And that Mornpen agroecology strategy, the first comprehensive analysis of the region's agriculture, food and beverage industry to build the agroecology and food economy strategy, is going to be going for 5 years, integrating economy, environment and community needs, driven by the EcoDev team with subject matter experts in agroecology, horticulture, supply chain and economic analysis. So yeah, a great opportunity. It's going to be kicking off with the consultation right now, and yeah, look forward to seeing how that unfolds over the next weeks and months. Very exciting development.
Can I also just add that we've also got a lot of support from down that way through Bite for Change, our initial funding for the research down there, and now our funding for the pilot has come through them. And one of our projects will be based, our pilot projects will be down there, and there's been a really great response from landholders as we've been putting our feelers out. So we haven't identified a specific site or locked anything in yet, but people are very responsive.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that, Julia. And Tanya also acknowledged Right for Change, and Sustain also has received funding from them. They're a great sort of collaboration of local philanthropists supporting food system change and young farmers and food economies in the Mornington Peninsula, Casey Cardinia region have been going for a few years now. A great source of small grants and support for these kinds of initiatives. So thank you for mentioning that. It's great that they're supporting Farmer Incubator as well.
I'll jump in there. Also, they've just funded us to have a coordinator's position for that particular region. So we'll be having more activities with Young Farmers Connect. So it'd be good to, I guess, sort of understand if there are specific needs and barriers for young farmers in that area. We'll look at addressing them directly.
Oh, fantastic. Well, that's a great, congratulations. That's really exciting. Well, we've got to be talking more then, because Sustain has received some funding from another source to look at some networking and advocacy development, connecting up local food networks and initiatives around that whole peri-urban region, which is linking to other research that we've been looking at, which is doing a comprehensive audit of local planning schemes in the 26 peri-urban Melbourne LGAs, looking at the barriers and enablers to diversified and small-scale agriculture. So we'll be publishing that over the next couple of months, and then looking at building an advocacy agenda across the kind of like, those LGAs in that part of Melbourne, and looking at speaking to the state government as well, because while we're talking about local government, it's important to remember that even more important in many ways in this area is the state government, and it has major say on development and urban sprawl and farmland protection, all those kinds of really critical issues, big structural issues. So that's exciting news. Congratulations.
All right, so I think we might just do one last question. I know that there are a few more that have come through in the chat. So what I'll do is put them to our lovely presenters and send out any responses that we get on those and suggestions, along with the recording and some of the key links for today. So I think the question to end on is from Tess. What are the steps to effectively and authentically engage, not just acknowledge, local Indigenous communities in small-scale food growing?
That's a good question. I'm also part of a not-for-profit that works on the business of biodiversity, and we get to work alongside a number of traditional owner groups as well. And we're helping to get impact investors to buy farms alongside and with traditional owners, and realise self-determination through that. So there's really cool projects on the way at the moment. I just can't talk about the details at the moment, but I think it's just. There's momentum. There's people who want to support and work alongside, and they're out there. And we're just going to keep uncovering them and getting these case studies and sharing those stories.
I guess what I would add is, in some ways, I think we need to adjust our expectations. I know specifically in our area now, a large number of the Indigenous community are now 4 generations of systemic unemployment. That simply offering jobs is not necessarily the solution, that there's a whole lot of cultural understanding that needs to happen as well, especially around the Indigenous community's strong desire to protect their cultural and intellectual property rights around foods and plants, and also, I guess, in a sense, understanding that there's not always a desire to commercialise their practices. The vast majority of the bush foods industry, even though I do not like that term, is still wild harvested rather than commercially produced. And what we have typically seen is that when it does become commodified, it's very quickly bought up by foreign investment. And so I think there's a resistance in many ways from the elders in the community to support strategies which look at commercialising their intellectual property, because they simply don't have the capacity to maintain ownership over those industries, which we've seen very clearly here with the tea tree industry, the lemon myrtle industry, and the sort of more major commodified native botanicals. That being said, we also know that the Indigenous communities are some of the most significant landholders, and so abundance of land is not the issue, but supporting them to find ways to integrate their cultural requirements into the non-Indigenous or the white person's economy is a very delicate process that requires a lot of consultation. I know in many times I've gone in all guns blazing and said, here's this training, here's these opportunities, here's these jobs, and it's either not well received or it's not exactly what they need. So I think coming to some greater understandings around what they want to drive. We initiated earlier this year a roundtable event for all Bundjalung Nations peoples to contribute to conversations around how to develop and maintain agency of the native foods industry in the Northern Rivers, which was a really rich discussion. And I think those kind of opportunities ought to come as an absolute first.
Fantastic. Thank you, Joel. Was there anybody else who wanted to speak on that, either from the panel or otherwise? I'm going to say that's a no. Yeah, so that's our last question. I'm going to throw to dear Nick Rose to wrap us up. But from myself, thank you very much to everyone who came, and obviously for the speakers for sharing your time and insights. It's greatly appreciated. And Nick will finish us up.
I'll mute myself. Thanks so much, George, and thanks so much to Joel, to Sam, to Julia, and to Tanya, and to everyone who's been with us this morning and over lunchtime for this webinar. Just looking at some of the comments, like people seem to have got a great deal out of it, a lot of inspiration, a lot of context, a lot of ideas, a lot of connections, talking about collaborations and projects, and people having very kind of concrete and practical takeaways from this, which is absolutely fantastic. So you know, for us, that's definitely kind of validation enough that it's been a great thing to do, and we're going to keep doing it. So yeah, huge thank you to our presenters. Little clap. you know, give them a hug, if a big sort of virtual hug. Wish all of you, you know, safety and success in everything that you do, and yeah, hold on to your dreams and visions for, you know, for agricultural change and food system change in your communities in Australia. And just by way of wrap up, just to remind again, please do help us out with our survey, the pandemic gardening survey. Help us kind of push past 9,000 responses and on towards 10, because that's a massively powerful message that we can send to local, state and federal government all around Australia, and landowners and others, to support urban agriculture in all its forms, both at this times and all times, is a really key part of building resilience, food security, community connection, and mental health and well-being, as well as nutritional health and well-being. So many benefits come from growing your own food, as I'm sure pretty much everybody on this webinar will be familiar with. George is sharing the link for that right now. Thanks very much, George. Also, our next webinar coming up, which we mentioned on the work with the land sharers and the organisations Food Next Door, Cooperative in Mildura, Green Connect in the Illawarra, and the United African Farm in Pakenham, facilitating access for new migrant communities to Australia and refugees. Really some groundbreaking, fantastic work being done there. That's happening on the 19th of August, and registration is now up for that. And of course, that is free for any members of Sustain. And thank you to the many members of Sustain who were here with us today. And if you do like and support our work, we encourage you to become a member. And by doing so, we've committed as a solidarity commitment to contribute 10% of those memberships to the Pay the Rent initiative, in terms of making a practical, tangible, concrete contribution to Indigenous sovereignty in Victoria and nationally. And I think there was a final thing that I was going to say, George.
Final thing was...
Australian, we were voting for Australian Ethical, yes. So please share that link again and help us, yeah, get this pop-up food justice urban farm in Preston up and happening. We're already going to do it because we've already got a little bit of funding thanks to the City of Darebin. We found out yesterday we've got a small grant to the City of Darebin to get things going, as well as the Moving Feast social enterprise. But we do need some more resourcing for infrastructure and coordination. So Australian Ethical have shortlisted us, along with a number of other fantastic projects. So please jump on there and vote. It's open until the 26th of July. So that is it from me. I'm going to wrap this up. There will be a recording that will be available. Thank you all very much. Stay safe, stay well, look after each other, and hopefully see you all again next month. And yeah, do send us feedback and suggestions for future presentations and presenters. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Cheers.
Bye.